Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. World. This is our community election connection. Engage and Activate 2020. We have all month long been presenting a number of different debates: congressional, legislative, executive, judicial. We have all month long been engaging our communities across the state in bringing you closer to the electoral process. If you feel as though you've been removed from the sphere of influence, we've tried to bring the candidates to you to help you become a more informed voter. It is your vote. And so we just try to provide you with information so that you can make a decision that aligns with what you think. We have a pro and con debate for you. Washington Referendum 90, the sex education in public schools measure is on the ballot in Washington as a veto referendum. A vote to approve Referendum 90 supports allowing Senate Bill 5395 to take effect, thereby requiring public schools to provide comprehensive sexual health education for all students and requiring students to be excused if requested by the parents. A vote to reject Referendum 90 opposes allowing Senate Bill 5395 to take effect, thereby not requiring that public schools provide comprehensive sexual health education to all students. All right, this is where we're at. Again, Washington Referendum 90, the sex education in public schools measure. I'm going to get to our pro and con guests who will be joining us. But first, I'm going to introduce our moderators, our lead news anchor and a bunch of other stuff lead on the news department. I'd like to welcome Kendra Leon. Kendra, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Under the circumstances, fantastic. Kendra Leon is the news anchor at Rainier Avenue Radio.world, a native of Seattle. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in journalism from Seattle University, is dedicated to delivering in-depth and accurate news. And also from our news department, Ashley Stenger. Ashley, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Good to have you both here. Ashley Stenger is currently one of three co-hosts on the news on Rainier Avenue Radio Live. The other is Asher Stein. Every Monday, you can catch them at 6 p.m. and every Wednesday at 6:30. And they bring you the news. Local news, world news, community news, national news, sports, and from around the world. So make sure and check out our news. Again, every Monday at 6 p.m. for a half an hour, and every Wednesday. And it's always live, and it's always current, and every Wednesday at 6:30 as well. And so happy to have Kendra and Ashley here. I will introduce our guests who will be here. This is from the pro side, Approve 90wa.org. Leah Griffin. Leah, are you there with us? Can you hear?
Absolutely, I'm here, and thanks for having me.
All right. Leah is a teacher, librarian, and sexual assault reform advocate who serves as representative of survivors on the Sexual Assault Forensic Examination Best Practices Task Force out of the Attorney General's office, and has been instrumental in passing legislation on trauma-informed police training, rape kit testing, and model hospital protocols for sexual assault survivors. In 2018, she won Patty Murray's Golden Tennis Shoe Award and accompanied the senator to the State of the Union address at the height of the At Me Too movement. She serves on the board of the Sexual Violence Law Center. Leah believes that comprehensive sex education is the most important action we can take to prevent sexual assault. Did I get that right, Leah?
You absolutely did.
All right. And also, on the pro side, Deontay Damper. Deontay was born in Seattle, and Deontay's focused his work on bringing health and LGBTQ affirming education to marginalized communities throughout the state of Washington. This started through his nonprofit work at Spokane as a peer navigator. In April of 2019, Damper made history as the NAACP's first LGBTQIA chair, the first in 110 years of the organization. And as of November 2019, he's a Rainier Beach High School's Black Student Union advisor. Damper as well started a support group for young men of color, Brother, BROTHA, it's the acronym, Brother Blacks Recovering, Overcoming Trauma, Health, and Awareness. In October of 2020, NAACP King County announced that Damper announced that he was going to run for president of the NAACP King County. So that's coming up pretty soon. Deontay, welcome.
Hello, welcome, and welcome to all the panelists.
And
Happy to be here.
Might I add, if that name sounds familiar to some of you who've listened and you've wondered, is that the yes, that's the same Deontay that was hosting Got Funny on Rainier Avenue Radio. And now, the con. And this is Parents for Safe Schools. And with me is Mindie Wirth. Mindie, are you there? Hello, Mindie.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much for having us here tonight.
Okay, that's okay. See, I already know when we're doing the virtual thing in Zoom, sometimes you have to unmute your mic and mute your mic, so I just get everybody ready. Mindie is the chair, Parents for Safe Schools, Reject R90 campaign, mom of 3 school-age kids, elementary, middle, and high school, former Vice President and Advocacy Chair, North Shore Council, PTSA, and a 15-plus year leader in tech. Mindie, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And also, again, on the con side, Whitney Holz. And Whitney is a wife, mother of 2, and co-founder of Informed Parents of Washington. Whitney, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Again, under the circumstances, fantastic. There's a lot going on right now. And just acknowledging that everybody's not doing fantastic. But hey, it is good to be able to be on the air with all of you and be able to have this discussion so that during this time, folks who may or may not have been able to access the information they're looking for have this opportunity to hear directly from y'all. And our moderators will be asking you questions. I'll give you a little go over the rules. And looking for some paperwork here. 1 second. It's okay. It's live radio, live everything, but I need to find it. Oh, okay. There we are right there. So here are the rules. You will get opening statement, and then you will get a closing statement. Both are 2 minutes long. The moderators will ask you questions. You will have 2 minutes to answer those questions. When we go to break, when we come back from break, one group will have the opportunity to ask a question of the other. You have 15 seconds to ask that question. The group that's asked will have 1 minute to answer the question, and then the group that originally asked the question will have 30 seconds to rebuttal, and then we'll switch roles. And so then the other group will be able to ask a question. They'll have 15 seconds to do that. I think you get how that works, and then we'll go back to our moderators. So with that in mind, we have the thing called the coin flip, and it's a little difficult to flip a coin. So I'm just going to randomly pick someone. I'm just going to say Whitney. And Whitney, if you wouldn't mind saying heads or tails, and then I'm going to show you and everybody what it is. I've got it right here. So you tell me heads or tails.
Tails.
Tails it is. So what that essentially means is you can go first or you can defer. So if you can defer to the pro side to go first. So if you choose to go first, then you'll go first with your opening statement. You'll go first with your question after the break, and then you go first with your closing statement. Obviously, if you defer, then you'll go second in all those places. Would you like to go first, or would you like to defer to the pro side?
What do you think, Mindy? Heads up for. All right, defer.
Defer. Okay. Okay, then Deontay and Leah, you will be going first, and then our moderators will be asking questions. Again, you're going to have a time limit. And so I will say to our moderators, I know that sometimes you will have to, and it is necessary to add context to the question, but try and keep the questions as brief as possible so that we can get to as many as we can so that folks can hear from the folks who are here. I'm going to read this one more again. Washington Referendum 90. The sex education in public schools measure is on the ballot in Washington state as a veto referendum. A vote to approve Referendum 90 supports allowing Senate Bill 5395 to take effect, thereby requiring public schools to provide comprehensive sexual health education for all students and requiring students to be excused if requested by their parents. A vote to reject Referendum 90 opposes allowing Senate Bill 5395 to take effect, thereby not requiring that public schools provide comprehensive sexual health education to all students. The pro side, you will go first. You will have 2 minutes, and you are now on the clock.
Hello, thank you, everyone. And even the cons in this space, because I think it's always open to have a dialogue about the conversation. After we finish this discussion, I think that we'll all come to an understanding that Referendum 90 is essential. Having sex education in our schools, especially towards minority communities, is essential, especially when you look at the demographics of how health disparities such as HIV and HPV have impacted minority communities, and majority of students have not had that education in their spaces of their homes. I think that it's very important for our kids to get. If we're saying education is a passport to the future, we also need to also let them know what consent looks like. I don't think that we have enough conversations about what that looks like. For me personally, I have been through certain situations where I did not know what consent looked like as a child. And if I did have Referendum 90 in my life at that time, that probably could have saved a child like me. And especially, a young child like me and other young LGBTQ youth that have grown up in King County. I can take up all of the 2 minutes, but just to make it quite frank, if it's going to be the opening statement, Referendum 90 is the only way.
Okay, are you forfeiting the last 30 seconds?
Do I? Oh, I can't forfeit. I have to forfeit it.
Well,
Actually,
you can keep talking. It's up to you.
No, I can be gracious. It's Halloween tomorrow. I can give it to the con side.
Okay. And now we will move to the con side. Again, you deliver it however form that you would like to. You can split it up, one person, but you have 2 minutes for your opening statement, and you are now on the clock.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony B. Again, hi, my name is Mindie Wirth, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to have the conversation with Rainier Avenue Radio. So in the final days of the legislative session, Olympia politicians pushed through an extreme new comprehensive sex education mandate for all students statewide, starting in kindergarten. Concerned parents and local communities worked hard to impact and amend the bill, but Olympia politicians just didn't listen. So instead, we saw a historic event happen. More than 260,000 signatures were collected, all by volunteers across the state in just a few weeks and in the middle of a pandemic, to put this bill on the ballot and allow voters to decide. Our coalition includes parents, grandparents, teachers, school board directors, pediatricians, and law enforcement, specifically those who deal with sex trafficking. With huge numbers of students failing math, science, and English, Washington families believe that Olympia should instead prioritize improving literacy and helping students graduate. This new law means that unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats will develop new statewide sex education standards for all students across the state with no input from parents, local school boards, and communities. Young children do need to learn social skills and then move on to the fundamental topics for learning. Referendum 90 would introduce material that includes graphic sexual subject matter starting for elementary aged children. And this year, state and local budgets are facing massive shortfalls that threaten funding for basic education. At a time when schools are challenged to pay for core programs, we cannot afford an expensive new mandate. Parents and local communities should be trusted to develop curriculum collaboratively. Schools must emphasize critical learning and prepare students for higher education and the job market.
10 seconds.
And school budgets must be prioritized to pay for essential programs during a time of budget cuts. This is why we're encouraging voters to protect local control, preserve school funding, and prioritize essential learning. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll be letting you know when there's 10 seconds.
Okay, sorry.
And for those of you, that's okay. And for those of you watching, if you're watching on the screen and you're seeing the clock roll down, depending on how the stream is coming to you, you might be getting it delayed. And for those of you who are listening, you're just going to hear me say that anyway. So, so that you know, I'll be reminding you when you have 10 seconds left. We will now begin with our moderators. Kendra, would you ask the first question, please? And your question will initially be directed to pro R90.
All right. Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm just looking at it. Okay. So one of the questions is, first, supporters of initiative of Referendum 90 say it will help educate students about the dangers of sexual and domestic violence. How would this be done and in an age-appropriate manner?
You have 2 minutes. Pro.
I can jump in on that. Thank you for asking. The main reason why I support the Approve Referendum 90 campaign is that we know that it prevents sexual violence and we know that it will prevent domestic violence. The amount of disinformation in that opening statement, though, I have to say is shocking. Like, that we live in this post-fact world now where the opposition is claiming that there wasn't community input. This was a law passed at the request of the elected superintendent of public instruction, Chris Regdahl, supported by our majority of our democratically elected representatives, and passed and was signed into law by our governor. And what's great about R90 is that the amount of community input that it allows is massive. It doesn't require a single curriculum forced down the throats of school districts like they claim. It actually allows school districts to choose curriculum that works for them. And when I hear that it's an expensive mandate, I think it's important to point back that the flash curriculum, which is the most commonly used curriculum already used in many of our school districts, has a $50 licensing fee. So this claiming that this is a massive budget demand on school districts is simply untrue. But what is true is that sexual assault, domestic violence costs taxpayers a lot of money. And if we're going to be concerned about the amount of money that we spend on things that are unnecessary and things that we should be preventing, it's the amount of money that we spend on rape and domestic violence that could be prevented if we're teaching consent education, if we're teaching our young people how to receive and say no, if we're teaching young people about bodily autonomy so that they can keep themselves safe. That's what's valuable, and that's what's important.
That's time. And the con side, would you like the question repeated?
I think we're actually okay. And Whitney, I'll go ahead and start things off and then you can jump in. So as your listeners may be aware, in 2018, we had a law passed in Washington state called Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law specifically is passed to prevent sexual abuse. This was a bipartisan supported law. And we didn't actually even wait to see Aaron's Law implemented before the groundwork was already in motion to get ESSB 5395 up for review. What Leah probably also knows is that OSPI conducted their own survey on whether or not parents and communities wanted comprehensive sex education. And their own survey suggested that 58% of parents said no, they did not. thousands of parents and community members lined up in Olympia starting as early as 4 a.m. to try to get into hearing rooms and give public testimony on this bill. Thousands of calls were made to legislators and the governor, and clearly these were not actually heard. This bill was voted on an almost party line vote. So yes, sure, it was passed, but there clearly was not input from the community. There was a number of amendments presented that would have made this bill supportable in a bipartisan nature, and all of these amendments were rejected. Whitney, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
I think it's important to point out that whenever you see a referendum on the ballot, it's usually because the constituency felt disenfranchised by Olympia, and Olympia did something that the majority disagree with, and they were able to gather the support in order to put a measure on the ballot. And that's exactly what happened with this bill. Again, OSPI ignored the majority of parents. Over 21,688 phone calls were made to legislature. They ignored tens of thousands of emails that they ignored, a 3,000 person protest at the beginning of
10
COVID
seconds.
that they ignored. So I disagree completely that this received any sort of support or community involvement.
And Ashley, your first question will be directed towards the pro side.
Towards the pro side?
Yes.
All right. So whether or not that referendum 90 is approved or denied, how would you say is the ideal sexual health education for those in grades K through 12?
Pro, 2 minutes.
Well, in my space, I do a lot of advocacy within the spaces of school and in minority communities, and I think that it is, when you look at the demographic of kids that are forced into kissing at young ages, such as 3rd grade, or I believe it's like when you get into high school, we have to start teaching our children about consent, let alone consent in conversations about what's inappropriate. I think that we, especially with our young Black girls in this community, we deal with a lot of inappropriate touching with all women, excuse me, and harassment and bullying. And I think that with bringing in referendum 90, it gives you, sorry, shoot, I forgot the question. I got so frustrated. Leah, would you like to take it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it looks like in the early grades, social and emotional learning, how to know what healthy relationships and healthy friendships are. And I love that you bring up Aaron's Law, because I happen to have with me the pen that the governor used to sign Aaron's Law, which I have because I advocated for that bill. I had worked on it. And it is so important because that bill shows us how much we all care about protecting our youth. But Aaron's Law did not mandate that every district provides the kind of education young people need to know when they're being touched inappropriately and to know when to reach out to a trusted adult. So that's why after helping to pass Aaron's Law, I immediately started providing input on this Senate bill so that we could make a more substantial change and make sure that all kids are protected from
10
sexual
seconds.
abuse and not just some that live in a specific zip code.
And the con side, do you need the question repeated?
Yes, please.
Okay. Ashley?
Barring whether or not referendum 90 is approved or denied, what does the ideal sexual health education look like for you in children with grades K through 12?
I'll start with that, Mindie, if you're okay with that. I think if we're going to talk about and call a sex ed method actually comprehensive, then it has to actually be comprehensive. We need to give them all of the information. CSE doesn't do that with a lot of their curriculum that we've reviewed. You mentioned Flash, Leah, earlier. One of the lessons in Flash talks about the pullout method and says that it is free, always available, and more effective than most people think when used correctly. We're talking to a class of 10th graders here in that kind of a lesson. But the one thing that is missing from that is the failure rate of 22%. In fact, Flash doesn't give any failure rates for any of their birth control methods. And I think that if we're going to give teens the information that they need in order to make a fully informed decision, things like that need to be included. It's very important that they're included. lessons on pornography don't include the addiction and the objectification of women. They're kind of poo-pooed off into a lesson on making sure that we have good body image. And I think that those are important things. That was an amendment actually that parents put forth to legislators to try and include any lessons on pornography would include that information, and it was rejected. Mindie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate, Leah, the efforts on Aaron's Law. I think it was such an important law, and, the question does get asked a lot. And you're right, Leah's Law, Aaron's Law is not a mandate. And if we are looking for something really to truly address sexual abuse prevention, which I think we can all agree is very important, that probably would have been the law to go after in terms of a mandate, instead of something that is called comprehensive sex education that includes a whole lot of other elements to it.
And that's time.
That are sensitive, and
that's time.
Some local communities
that is time. And Kendra, next question, and this should initially be directed towards the con side.
All right. So Referendum 90 promises instruction on affirmative consent and bystander training for students, including, as we've mentioned before, those in grades K through 12. What is your argument for or against teaching these subjects?
2 minutes.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges here with teaching affirmative consent or consent in general is that we start introducing the topic, the notion of consent, as early as 4th grade. And if we just look kind of chronologically, 4th graders are not of a legal age to actually consent to anything, but we start introducing concepts that are not just about talking about saying no, but actually starting to say yes at the age of 4th grade. And this was, I believe, another amendment, Whitney, correct me if I'm wrong, but one that actually was not approved as well, that parents found objectionable to the curriculum and some of the content. And this is something that is concerning. So I think we're talking a lot about age and some other elements here.
Are you forfeiting the rest of your time?
Whitney, are you on mute?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I think too, Leah mentioned the unfunded mandate part. So when we're talking about what we're looking at, we are looking at the curricula that we've been accused of falsifying, which is not true. It's all curriculum that we've used, and parents have an issue with the way that those actual role plays are played out in the classroom. They can get very graphic. And I think there was even one that was more of a role play on how to convince the other person to actually engage in sex acts when someone wanted to be abstinent. So parents are looking at these actual curricula and the way these consent lessons are played out and having concerns about them.
And you're forfeiting. I guess you got about 10 seconds left, but okay. And the pro side, would you like the question repeated?
Okay, let me just find it. So the question was, Referendum 90 promises instruction on affirmative consent and bystander training for students, including, as we said before, grades K through 12. What is your argument for or against teaching these subjects?
2 minutes.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Okay. Referendum 90 promises instruction on affirmative consent and bystander training for students grades K through 12. What is your argument for or against these teaching these subjects, I mean?
Well, mainly just kind of bouncing back to what they were saying, like in a perfect world, we want every family to have like the tools of the conversation, but when it all comes.
We lost Deontay, so I'm going to continue on with that, and while he gets logged back in, talk about what consent is. And I believe that we should be teaching children consent from the earliest age possible, that when somebody comes over and they want to hug your child, you can let your child know you don't have to hug that person. You don't owe grandma a kiss if grandma wants to kiss you. But having bodily autonomy and knowing that they have the right to do what they want with their body should start as young as we possibly can, so that we normalize knowing that you can say no to other people. Mindie was describing a situation that is not a lesson of consent about sexual coercion in curriculum, and that is absolutely untrue. Sexual coercion is anathema to the affirmative consent curriculum that we're trying to teach here. We want students to know that it's okay to say no, and that they can be able to receive a no gracefully, to know that sexual coercion is not okay in any situation. So when we're talking about younger kids, we're talking about friendships and asking other students if they want to have a hug before they hug them, asking if somebody wants to shake hands, and developing this culture of consent well before any element of sexuality is introduced. So consent, we talk a lot about in terms of sexuality, because that's where it manifests in the most necessary ways. But really, when we talk about a culture of consent, we need to realize that it's more about more than the sexuality. It's also how we interact with each other and treat each other with respect, and our own bodies with respect.
And that's time. Thank you.
What she said. Sorry.
Ashley, your next question will be directed initially to the con side.
What are your thoughts on parents having the ability to opt out of the curriculum under Referendum 90? What are your thoughts on what the opt-out ability should look like?
2 minutes.
Yeah, so I think something that's really important here to call out when we talk about the opt-out, and this is certainly a hot topic, so love to dive into it and appreciate the question. Parents do have the ability to opt out of the CSE, and this is the Comprehensive Sex Education Specific course that is protected under the law. It is the intention of OSPI, the Sexual Health Director, Lori Dill. She is on the record as saying that she would like to see comprehensive sex education integrated in other classroom settings. And that is what falls under the umbrella and the concept of comprehensive sex education. Again, when you look at the curriculum, you can find examples that bring comprehensive sex education into conversations about math, about drama. Parents cannot opt their students out of these conversations that sit outside of the comprehensive sex ed classroom setting. And parents also, it's really hard to opt your kid out of the hallway conversation or what's being said at recess. And Whitney, I know you have a lot more perspective on this as well.
We had two girls come down with us to Olympia to give testimony about what happened during their comprehensive sex ed rollout at their school. And they were opted out and unfortunately were bullied for it. The kids that opted out actually were bullied for not being able to participate in the class or not wanting to participate in the class. An amendment 2, which I think is interesting, that would have allowed kids to decide whether or not they wanted to take this class for themselves, was also rejected. And I think that that's important to be able to give if we're going to talk about consent, whether or not kids actually want to learn this type of method of sex education. The girls who gave testimony also talked about how the curricula was actually used to harass students.
10 seconds.
And how the talk at their school became a lot more lewd, anatomically correct and all of that, but a lot more lewd with the harassment that they received.
And that is time. And same question. Do you need the question repeated?
Just for the sake of this, and my hands are right here, so go ahead and repeat the question.
What are your thoughts on parents having the ability to opt out under Referendum 90? What should it look like?
I don't think that parents should be able to opt out of this space because it's essential. When we talk about I think the way that the con side is talking about this is if we're going to have like Pornhub just showing on the screen, but when it comes down to it, we're talking about the safety of our youth, especially when it comes to our LGBTQ youth. We are not, with us not having the conversations about who they are, that may lead to spaces of bullying and opting out of certain classes like that doesn't give some children an opportunity to actually know exactly what my pronouns mean or how to protect our young trans and non-binary children within the schools. Leah, would you like to take?
I would add that, I'm a teacher and I'm so sorry to hear about those two young girls who were bullied, and that shouldn't have happened for not participating in the class. And what's so ironic about that is that it's the exact social and emotional learning skills that this law teaches in K through fourth grade, of how to be good friends, how to be accepting of other people, how to not bully, and to treat people with respect. That is all part of this curriculum that, had it been taught earlier, might have prevented the exact bullying that those girls faced opting out of that particular classroom. What this law does allow is for parents to opt themselves out. And you can opt out of the lessons, but you cannot opt out of a culture of change. And we've had the Me Too movement. We realize how widespread sexual coercion and violence is. And if the culture is changing in the hallways and students are talking about how to prevent sexual violence, that's a culture change we need.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is part of our debate series, which is part of our Community Election Connection, Engage and Activate 2020. The engage part is to engage you into the conversation, into the issues and concerns that you have that impact your communities. The activate, well, that's the part where you need to vote, or you can advocate, but you start to do something. We're going to be back to finish this conversation here in a couple minutes, and when we come back, remember, again, starting off, the pro side will have the opportunity to go first in asking a question, 15 seconds, and then there'll be a 1-minute response and a 30-second rebuttal. And then the con side will also have the opportunity to ask a question. We'll be back to continue this right after these messages.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not being reprimanded by traffic cops, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Phil-Am Radio, servicing the Filipino and Filipino Americans all over the world. Phil-Am Radio, streaming live in the internet every Tuesday from 1 o'clock to 2:30 p.m. Seattle, USA time. We are your host, Kuya Bert Kawili, Emma Heron, and
Manny Panganiban.
Phil-Am Radio.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio. In April, many airlines started requiring passengers to wear masks on planes, and some airlines even enforced the policy. Just on Monday, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said it now, quote unquote, strongly recommends all passengers and crew members wear masks. So the big question is this: how well do the masks work? Do they make it safe to fly across the country for a family visit? Per NPR, since airlines have started requiring masks, scientists have now not documented one super spreading event on airlines. David O. Friedman, an infectious disease doctor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, who worked with other scientists, said, quote, "There's encouraging evidence from a number of flights that masking does help greatly, but it would be nice to study it further. The circumstantial evidence is your risk is low on a plane if there is rigid masking," unquote. And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
This could be the most important 30 seconds of the year. That's how long we have to convince you that you have power. Want change in your local community? Vote. Tired of government not working for you? Vote. Done with people saying nothing can be done? Vote. Finished with protests falling on deaf ears? Vote. Fed up with elected officials' empty promises? Reclaim your power and vote them out. You can't win if you don't play, and will never win if you don't vote. For more info, go to reclaimyourvote.org.
Brought to you by your local Urban League.
The coronavirus is real. Let's be diligent about washing our hands. Did you know that this virus can live on surfaces for up to 9 days? That's why it's also important to disinfect things that an infected person might touch, like your cell phone. Even if you wash your hands often, when you pull out your phone, those germs go right back on your hands. When's the last time that you cleaned your phone? When the virus is spread by sneezing or coughing, those tiny airborne droplets eventually land on surfaces that you touch with your hands. On average, we touch our face 16 times an hour, which is why it's important to wash your hands and wipe down commonly used surfaces, including your cell phone. This message is a public service of Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is our special Community Election Connection, Engage and Activate 2020. part of what we're doing for the community to have you become more aware of how your issues and your concerns align with the things that are on the ballot. So we've actually done the governor's debate, we've done the lieutenant governor's debate, we've done the District 9 congressional debate, which again sends someone to DC. We've done the District 2 U.S. representative debate. We've done the 37th legislative, both positions 1 and 2. We've had black candidate forums to let folks know more about who the black candidates are, not choosing a side, but just making sure that there was a platform in Pierce County, King County, Snohomish County. We've done judicial debates, Supreme Court, Washington Supreme Court Justice Position 3, Washington State Supreme Court Justice Position 6, and we're going to have King County Superior Court Justice debate 13, Position 13, but right now it is Referendum 90 that we are discussing, that we're talking about. And I mentioned before that there would be an opportunity for each side to ask a question of the other. So, Pro, you have 15 seconds to ask a question of the con side directly. 15 seconds, they will have a minute to respond, and you will have 30 seconds to respond after that. So 15 seconds to ask your question, pro side to the con side.
Okay, my question is just off the top of the dome. I wanted to ask the con side, in what ways, one of the spaces in the referendum is LGBTQ affirming. How and in what ways do you think that we should affirm within education for
you got to make it quick. You're out of time.
For the youth.
You have 30 seconds to respond, or excuse me, 1 minute.
Whitney, you want to go ahead and start? Sorry,
Yep.
I was finding the mute button again.
I think that everyone deserves to feel appreciated and welcome in schools. I do think that it is important to recognize that we are talking about children here. They're still children, and whether or not these topics and the way that they are addressed in this pleasure-based method is appropriate for children, that is unequivocally across the board, absolutely not, full stop for me.
Yeah, I mean, our group is, we're advocating for all children, and looking at this curriculum, we do not think that this is the answer. And in fact, we had a number of parents of LGBTQ children or who were LGBTQ themselves who signed our petition and agreed to support our campaign because they did not feel that this referendum actually addresses some of the concerns that you're expressing.
10 seconds. Okay, and 30 seconds. Pro side, if you'd like to rebut that. 30 seconds. You're on the clock.
That's all you, Deontay.
I would highly doubt that that LGBTQ parents would not want to affirm for their young youth who constantly get bullied in the spaces of communities. I think that the way that the question was answered is just pretty clear exactly on how stagnant sometimes we can be in the spaces of not knowing that this is actually a passport for some of our children, especially the ones who aren't safe, like LGBTQ students.
And that's time. Con side, you have 15 seconds to ask a question of the pro side. They will get 1 minute to respond, and then you'll have an additional 30 seconds to berut. 15 seconds to ask your question.
So as you know, this law was passed without a fiscal note. With state revenues declining, we're expecting an $8 to $10 billion shortfall, and school districts have already begun to cut essential services. What funding sources would you identify to be used to pay for this new statewide mandate? Should we cut counselors, teachers, free breakfasts, or after-school programs?
And that's it. Pro side, 1 minute.
Great. As a school librarian, I know how important this curriculum is and how much all of the other elements of education are in our system. And what's amazing is that there are so many free and low cost curricula available for schools to choose from. The Washington Education Association, our teachers union, as well as Shape WA, both strongly endorse Approve 90 because teachers know how important it is to provide this. OSPE reported that in some school districts, they've received grants already to develop this curriculum. So that can be available for free for the districts who don't currently have sexual health education. And like I said before, the most common curricula that's offered is the flash curricula that costs $50 for a licensing fee. So when you ask us to make the false choice between cutting a teacher or cutting this curriculum, that's absurd when we know that the licensing fee is either going to be free or $50. Your budgeting concerns are completely unwarranted.
And
we
that's
can afford
time.
to keep our children safe and healthy.
And Conside, you have 30 seconds to rebut that.
So then what we're saying is that we're eliminating choice by forcing districts to choose from the free curriculum, which is exactly what my organization, Informed Parents of Washington, has been showing parents for months now, and is what brought 266,000 parents to sign a petition during a global pandemic. It's not something that they want in their schools. It's not something that they find acceptable for their children.
And the state of Washington
10
has a
seconds.
24 credit. Oh, are we out of time?
10 seconds.
Yeah, the state of Washington has a 24 credit graduation requirement. The smaller districts we're talking about that have funding issues are looking at trading off between those credits and teaching sex ed.
Okay, we're going to go back to our moderators now. Kendra, you have the first question, and your question will initially be directed to the pro side.
All right, sorry about that. So the Department of Health stated that Washington's teen pregnancy rate in recent years was approximately 1/3 of the rate it was in 1990. Do you believe that approval of Referendum 90 would increase the rate, decrease the rate, or have no effect on the rate of teen pregnancy in the state? Why or why not?
2 minutes. To the pro side.
I definitely feel that it would decrease. I think by putting more information out there within the spaces of the bill. I think that by providing more education about sexual health and sexual risks and such as pregnancy, not such as pregnancy, but such as STDs, STIs, as well as awareness of pregnancies is essential for our young youth in this community. I don't think that we have. I think sometimes we live through rose-colored glasses as if it doesn't exist, but I do think that it would decrease and also assist communities, especially, actually all communities in rural areas.
Yeah, Deontay is right. And we also have the literature and the studies to back this up. The Journal of Adolescent Health just this month published an article that shows that looking at the research over the last 30 years, that having comprehensive sexual health education lowers rates of youth pregnancy, lowers rates of sexually transmitted infections and sexual abuse, and reduces health inequalities, that it prevents domestic violence and sexual abuse and improves healthy relationships. The article's author explains that keeping children ignorant of sex does not protect them. Kids will still find access to information about sex, and there's no topic area other than this that we value ignorance over knowledge. 2015 global review from the United Nations Population Fund found that comprehensive sexual health education for students starting in kindergarten through 12th grade lowers the number of sexual partners, increases the amount of time that students wait before they have sex. It actually increases abstinence among educated populations who know about sexual health education, improves condom use, which reduces STIs, HIV, and unwanted pregnancy. So all of the research is on our side.
And that's time. Conside, would you like the question repeated?
Yes, please.
Kendra?
Oh, sorry about that. So the Department of Health stated that Washington's teen pregnancy rate was approximately 1/3 of the rate it was back in 1990. Do you believe that approval of Referendum 90 would increase the rate, decrease the rate, or would it have no effect on the rate of teen pregnancy in Washington? Why or why not?
2 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started here. So we're talking about teen pregnancy rate, which is one measure. There's a lot of other measures that we should also be looking at as well, Kendra. And so one that we found that was very interesting is, of course, as we've talked about, the FLASH curriculum being taught now in King County schools, which is King County was where FLASH curriculum was developed. Over the last decade, we've actually seen a dramatic increase in STIs, in fact, the rates there. So if we're talking about efficacy, it's hard to say that this is actually working here. I mean, it's also hard to know whether or not a reduction in teen pregnancy is because children are informed or because children have greater access to Plan B. Because it's over the counter, we have no statistics on what that actual use rate is and how it's impacting student behavior. So this is something we just don't have access to, unfortunately, to say that this is truly effective. We're talking about evidence informed versus evidence based. It's easy to find a study that just kind of, mirrors what you think is actually the case, as opposed to looking across studies and across broad-based research that may not actually align with your point of view on a particular topic.
And also the Journal of American Psychology reported on a study done that was produced in the American Journal of Public Health, and they did evaluations on non-abstinence only pregnancy preventions, comprehensive sexuality education programs. 15 independent studies evaluated the programs, and the results found that only 13% showed an equivocal results, no fewer pregnancies, and 74% of the programs that they studied showed that comprehensive sex education had no impact on teen pregnancies or STIs. And as Mindy pointed out, if we're going to look at how this is working in Seattle, which has taught FLASH forever, then we can look and see that they have participated along with the rest of the nation in the rise in STDs.
And Ashley, your next question will initially be directed towards the pro side.
What aspect on your side of the debate do you feel like is most misinterpreted by the opposing side?
2 minutes, pro.
I would definitely say it would have to be the LGBTQ within education, within the LGBTQ community, or affirming space education, as well as the conversation about consent for our young youth. I say that because I think that, especially living in a space where I know that there's a lot more BIPOC communities. So I know that for a lot of privileged communities really can't understand on how important it is to actually have a conversation about affirming for our young non-binary trans youth. It is for their safety. I know that as a kid, there were no programs available for young queer boys that looked like me. And I think that some of us are behind. Some of us can live under a privileged lens and not understand how essential it is for a young Black trans woman or man or young non-binary person needs to grow up, and the community needs to be educated on where they're at. And that's really all I have. Ms. Griffin?
Ms. Griffin, I would say the most frustrating part for me is the part where they misinterpret the curriculum seemingly willfully. And we've seen this with the entire campaign that they've run, spreading misinformation and lies about what's taught to our kids. None of your third grade kids' teachers are going to be teaching sexual positions to third graders. That's an absurdity. This law mandates that this education is age appropriate. That is written into the law. So anything that you're hearing from them that is clearly not age appropriate is not part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep kids safe and healthy. We're trying to make sure that young people know that they can reach out to a trusted adult for help. We're trying to make sure that teenagers know that they can say no and prevent sexual violence. That's what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to sexualize children.
That's time. And the con side. Or do you need to hear the question? Would you like to hear the question again?
I think we know the question here. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and get started. I think probably for our group, the most frustrating aspect is with the approved side, only giving a partial view of the truth here. So they're nice sound bites. They feel good. it's easy to just look at it and continue on. And I will say kudos to them for doing a good job with that. But really what we've been saying from the beginning is that people need to be informed, and the devil's really in the details. We have people, parents, community members that do care about our children, that have spent their time and resources investigating this and trying to understand it and trying to make sense of it, and are coming to the same conclusions. This is wrong. This is not right for our children. And I will just point out that last week, the state Supreme Court in a 6-3 ruling did say twice in their decision, the reference materials included in the 3Rs curriculum provided, and we're talking about the case here about the Superintendent of Public Instruction voter pamphlet statement on the superintendent's website, could inform fourth graders of different sexual positions. This is on page 8 of their decision. On page 7, they go on to say the policy would result in unintentionally exposing fourth graders to depictions of and thus teaching them different sexual positions. I would assess that we are actually giving parents the facts and letting them decide for themselves whether or not this is truly age appropriate.
I think for me, it's most frustrating when people say that we're spreading misinformation. Literally what we did is we read the bill that said OSPI has to produce a list of approved curricula that they have already looked at and said is age appropriate. And we started posting examples from those curricula. Clearly what OSPI interprets as age appropriate and released for schools to be able to teach our children is in direct contrast to what the majority of parents feel, that they want some unrelated adult telling their children about sex.
Kendra, your next question will initially be asked of the con side.
Great. Do you believe Referendum 90 would provide more, less, or no change in understanding sexual health in same-sex relationships or for LGBTQ plus students? If not, do you have an alternative?
Con, 2 minutes.
Thanks, yeah. Okay, Whitney, do you want to start with this one?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the question again.
Can you, this is going to count into the 2 minutes. Kendra, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Do you believe that Referendum 90 would provide more, less, or no change in understanding sexual health in same-sex relationships or for LGBTQ plus students? If not, do you have an alternative?
I think that the standards that put forth by OSPI already require that if you're going to teach sexual education, that it includes that. What we are against is this particular method of sex ed, which is a pleasure-based method that we don't want our children to learn. International Planned Parenthood, who wrote the framework for this, actually says that our approach includes an emphasis on sexual expression, sexual fulfillment, and sexual pleasure. And this represents a shift away from methodologies that focus exclusively on the reproductive aspects of adolescent sexuality. That is the curriculum, that is the method that we are coming against. That is the method that we are saying we don't want our schools to teach our kids about pleasure, which again, Lori Dills, OSPI, went on record and said is something that she would like to see taught to kids in school. And this is the woman that districts are going to be going to for direction as they proceed forward with this if this referendum passes.
You have 30 seconds. Would you like to forfeit the time? Okay.
Mindy, you want to have? No.
Kendra, same pro side. Would you like to hear the question repeated?
Did you want to hear the question repeated?
Yes, please.
Okay. So do you believe Referendum 90 would provide more, less, or no change in understanding sexual health in same-sex relationships or for LGBTQ plus students? If not, do you have an alternative?
I think that it's very important to give a lot of information when it comes to sexual health awareness, health risk in the spaces. Me, myself, I have been advocating for, I've been teaching HIV awareness classes within the spaces of Seattle public schools. And one of the main reasons why I do that, I was diagnosed in 2013. And I remember as I grew up, there was no language. No one taught me about sexual health. No one taught me about risk. And I didn't know what that looked like. But then here we are in 2020, and 1 out of 2 men who have sex with men are diagnosed with HIV. I think that it's very important to make sure that we're coming into the schools and teaching people about awareness, especially when it comes out of a cultural lens. Leah, would you like to add on to that? And oh, by the way, I just thought of. Never mind. I'm not even gonna go there. I'm not going to go there. That's it. That's it.
You still have 1 minute.
Oh, I do.
Or the pro side has 1 minute left. Would you like to forfeit that time?
Yes, I can forfeit my time to Mindie.
Okay. Well, would you like the question repeated? Hello?
I was forfeiting it back to the con side.
Oh, okay. Then we'll go on. We'll go on to the next question. Ashley, your question should be directed towards the con side.
What resources can parents access in order to learn more about your side of the debate?
2 minutes.
Well, Whitney, hey, this is your time to plug.
Trying to find my mouse on the side here. We started a page, Informed Parents of Washington, where what we did is we went through the curricula that is put forth by OSPI per the legislation. And the legislation just says that OSPI has to put out this list and that schools are encouraged to choose a curriculum from this list if they cannot afford to draft one of their own. Which Eatonville, which is a small school district, they did their cost analysis and it's going to be around $300,000 for them. So when we're talking about what is going to be taught to our students, we really are talking about the curricula from this list. And you can go to informedparentsofwashington.com or our Facebook page, and there you can find where we have uploaded lessons directly from several of these options on that page so that parents can see exactly what these lessons are and how they are taught. These are common sense topics, common sense things that I think most parents would agree they want their kids to taught, but how they are taught through the lens of CSE is completely different than what I think most parents find agreeable. Well, actually, 266,000 parents made the decision that it is not what they want their kids to learn. And probably even more that, you can go and see for yourself. That's what we encourage parents to do. Go and see for yourself. See if this is what you want your children and how you want your children learning these topics.
Yeah, and I'll just add on really quick here. I mean, we're talking about curriculum that meets a certain set of standards, and these standards can be set annually by OSPI. And one thing to keep in mind is the standards as they are today are suggesting that this list of curricula meets those standards. There's always an opportunity down the road for a new leader in OSPI to have a different set of standards. And just to be clear, our organization is not an anti-sex ed group or an abstinence only group, but consider the possibility that under a new leadership, an abstinence-only approach or framework is approved. That would radically change the type of curriculum that school districts would be mandated to teach, which I believe the approved team would probably not agree to either. We oppose that as well.
Time. And pro side, would you like the question repeated?
No, it's okay. First, I want to just touch on that slippery slope argument that they were just talking about. This is a law with very clear standards that was passed. And those standards are emotional social learning in K-4, consent education, and LGBTQ inclusion. Those are the standards that need to be met in order to be with this law. And to find more information about why you should vote to approve R90, you can check out our website at approve90wa.org. But you can also look at literally every single major newspaper in this state in conservative and liberal leaning communities alike who have all endorsed the approval of R90. These include the Spokesman Review, the Seattle Times, the Tacoma News Tribune, the Everett Herald, the Walla Walla Union Bulletin, the Vancouver Columbian, the Stranger, the Inlander, even the Lewiston Tribune over the border in conservative-leaning Idaho endorsed the Approve R90 position. So please feel free to check out our website or any of those conservative and left-leaning newspapers.
You still have time? A little under a minute?
That's okay.
Okay. That being said, what I have tried to do, since we had multiple folks on from Pro and Con, was give everyone some room to have conversation. Normally, we would have cut it down to a minute answers, but there were some answers that there was clear need to get more in depth about it, and everyone has agreed that we would go an extra half an hour. So, nope. Okay, no, we didn't get that. Okay, well, you know what? Then I'm going to now give you an opportunity to do your closing statements. Again, the pro side will go first, and you will have 2 minutes for your closing statement, and this will be from the pro side. 2 minutes.
Great. Sex education does not make our children grow up faster. It makes sure that they grow up smarter. Sexual health education is not controversial. And that's what they've been trying to make you believe this whole time. The vast majority of Washingtonians believe that it is good and right to teach affirmative consent education to prevent sexual violence. The vast majority of Washingtonians believe it is good and right to give students the information they need to prevent unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections. I am really proud to be here today urging voters to approve Referendum 90. We're proud to be working in a coalition with parents, pediatricians, teachers, librarians, sexual assault prevention advocates, and over 150 community organizations with over 100 faith community leaders across our state who endorse approve Referendum 90 because we all share the same goal. We want children to grow up safe with bright and healthy futures, to make sound decisions and happy and fulfilling relationships, and to succeed in school and life. Washington has had strong guidelines and standards for high quality, evidence-based, age-appropriate sex education for over a decade, but too many school districts have neglected to participate beyond the required HIV/AIDS prevention instruction. And in schools where sex education is being taught, information about abuse prevention and intervention, affirmative consent, and healthy relationships has often been left out. By approving Referendum 90, we have the opportunity to make sure that young people are not left in the dark and that every student across our state has access to high quality, medically accurate, age appropriate, comprehensive sexual health education regardless of their zip code.
Okay, and now closing statements for the con side. You have 2 minutes.
Legislation which impacts sensitive issues is always strengthened when both political sides have some input. A few years ago, Democrats and Republicans took on the issue of state support for undocumented students receiving state higher ed support. They worked through difficult issues and passed a law which had bipartisan support. But in this case, one party ran through a law and repeatedly failed to adopt suggested amendments from the other side. That's not good lawmaking. That's just naked political power. That produced a law which leaves half of our population feeling disenfranchised. We want to create an environment that maximizes parental involvement, and this law does not do that. A few examples include an amendment to translate curriculum into other languages was rejected. There's one to give students the ability to opt out was rejected. One allowing parents to attend the class was rejected. That they can't integrate the subject into other classrooms was rejected. Teachers' abilities to opt out of teaching this was rejected. The teaching dangers of porn was rejected. Teaching dangers of abortion were rejected. Math curriculum mandated rejected. English curriculum mandated rejection. Science curriculum mandated rejection. Involving parents in curriculum feedback was rejected. Just how many signatures we gathered reflects how much this issue means to parents. This is what they say when getting on the ballot and what they are continuing to say by rejecting Referendum 90. Our students deserve a sexual education that provides them with the skills and knowledge to make a truly informed decision, but not at the cost of parental rights, not at the cost of school districts facing already overworked teachers and overextended budgets, and not at the cost of the safety of our children. There is common ground when it comes to sex education, but ESSB 5395, the bill on the ballot, does not provide that. We need to go back to the drawing board and develop options, not mandates for districts. If we're going to fully fund education, then sex ed needs to be included in that. If we're going to respect parental rights, then we need to work closely with the community to develop a truly equitable plan. And if we're going to protect children, we need to ensure this method we choose will not inadvertently place them in greater danger.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying thank you to our moderators from the Rainier Avenue Radio.world news department, Kendra, Leon, and Ashley Stenger. Wonderful job. Thank y'all. And again, thank y'all, Kendra and Ashley. Good to see you.
Pleasure being here.
Again, you can catch them every Monday at 6 and Wednesdays at 6:30, delivering local news, regional news, national news, world news, and sports as well. That's again Mondays at 6 and Wednesdays at 6:30. And special thanks to our guests who came and took their time to share their views on, again, this very important issue. I guess I'd like to start off by saying, Leah, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about sex education and how to keep our kids safe, so I appreciate you having us.
And again, from the pro side, Deontay, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I'll see you in an hour.
And Mindie Wirth from Parents for Safe Schools. Mindie, thank you for coming.
Tony B, thank you so much for letting us join tonight. This was great.
And also from the con side, co-founder of Informed Parents of Washington, Whitney Holz. Wendy, thank you for coming as well.
Thank you for giving me as a parent the opportunity to speak on behalf of my children that Olympia did not.
All right. We are going to be back in about 50 minutes. Again, we're going to continue with our community election connection. We're giving you the opportunity to find out more information about the candidates, about what's on the ballot, about where the positions of the candidates are. And coming up here at 7 o'clock, we will have our King County Superior Court Judge position number 3, Hillary Madsen, Andrea Robertson. Again, that's King County Superior Court Judge position 13. I might have said 3. Judge position 13, Hillary Madsen, Andrea Robertson. That will wrap up our community election connection as far as our debates go. On Monday and Tuesday, you'll be able to listen basically all day and hear the debates that we've done. While you're filling out your ballot, if you haven't done it yet, again, this is your vote. This has been our effort to not tell you what to think, but just provide you with the information so that you can make a decision about what aligns most with your views directly from people who are engaged in this position, pro and con, for the sexual health in schools, sexual education in schools. Sex is what they're talking about. So if that made you uncomfortable, hopefully there was something in here that made you more comfortable or helped you with understanding what we're talking about. We'll be back in about, I'd say about 50 minutes. We're going to go to our regularly scheduled programming. I would like to thank our sponsors, the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. Thank you for the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle for supporting our community election connection for the statewide effort. And then also Seattle Academy of Arts and Sciences. Thank you to Seattle Academy, the supporter, and also for Seattle Academy and Urban League, the Student Election Connection. We have been teaching classes about voter awareness and things that go along with voting, like what a congressional district is, what the state attorney general does, what the secretary of state does, what the electoral college is. We went across the ballot with what voter suppression looks like, and we have this curriculum actually embedded in schools around the state. And our educators in that program are both freshmen in college, so they're talking to their peers. Unfortunately, the program is full right now. But this opportunity to engage youth in workshops, as most of you may know, 18 to 24, vote the least. You turn 18 and all of a sudden you're turned on to this thing called voting with no information. And what do you do? How do you do it? What do all these things mean? Well, that's what our Student Election Connection has done. We've connected youth statewide, and following the election, we're going to bring some of these youth on and have roundtable discussions so you can hear from them about what their thoughts are, what their concerns are, what their issues are, and their effort now to connect to the electoral process and become part of the sphere of influence, just like you. If you use your vote, you become part of the sphere of influence on this election. We'll be back in about 45 minutes. Thank you for tuning in to RainierAvenueRadio.world.